The active entanglements from the system would, from the ecosystem's point of view, be a manifestation, such as the existence of the landscape itself forming its own particular identity. This materializing the culmination of creatures seeking to adapt and evolve around this construct, actively, such as the Great Wyrm Green Dragon, having been dominated by it, materializes its head as its thrall, materializing the exponential changes to everything about every single encounter, exponentially compounding their collaborations with each other as the function of its specialty in the great game of dragons materializes its exchange, having been proven the best of its classes amongst other green dragons who, having systematically lost to it, have become subordinated as their ideals, making them offer it as the Great Wyrm Dragon, providing the hordes and its victories from its former classmates, companions, and subordinates, and in this alignment materializes that system, having engaged in the entanglement with this magnificent landscape, seeks to craft the perfect series of structures, such as the farming and ranching structures, which, having at their core identity the capability of overlapping functions, as their acidic breath is non-offensive to the planet, their poisonous fumes non-interfering, generates the function of the entire space as its lair, and the manipulation and crafting of its ecosystems form to its specific unique forms, having generated the attunement between the two as they craft and specifically build the mazes and traps and puzzles derived by all of its engagements. This includes the active roaming Tiberu Bushu, who, by definition, are actively engaged in the hunting campaigns and the retaliations, which, having been pursued as werewolves, materialize the exponential terrors upon the local populations, who, actively seeking retaliations against it, would go into the woods, where many will perish, and feeding the ecosystem and all of its monsters, and satisfying the land itself by these active sacrifices, materialize the ongoing longevity of this relationship, which has its active manipulations of its surrounding parties, that they may engage in great battles with each other upon the landscape, that they, having done so, must be scarce, and thus leave their fallen comrades as the function of more pressing matters becomes actively the problem in these types of areas, allowing for it to be dissolved and consumed by the environment. And as these structures developed various cults and religions, such as the lawful good Paladins, who, having been promoted according to these religious functions, actively have as their core identity their infusements that they may acquire secret passages through this place, giving them extraordinary boons and developments, maturities that others would not be able to do, and therefore have a magical superiority to competitors that are not attuned and favored by the environment. They then being able to magically appear as though behind through these magical thickets, could conquer their enemies with these superior strategies not otherwise obtainable. And their gods, having viewed this with extraordinary favor, would correct by divine intervention their werewolves and other curses, which, as a function of its relationship to that ecosystem, would separate the parasite of the curse, which, having been imbued with the entire concentration of it, would become its own material creature, and thus those that have developed with the curse and have developed experience and have matured in power and potency have concentrated those powers separate to itself into the curse, which was the thing that acquired the experience, and therefore this parasite, having been removed from themselves, have been imbued upon another creature, which takes the curse for them, and it, dwelling amongst the wilderness, can scurry off and not bother them again. Now, these regions are very much so a melting pot of societies, peoples, religions, and theologies of every form and substance. And to this extent, their active non-interference with each other, as the rule amongst all, actively sustain their collaborations in mutual efforts, and therefore are not subject to subterfuge, even if they are of opposing alignments. The chaotic evil will not subvert the lawful good, and the lawful good will not crush the chaotic evil. They have made their peace, and they have settled their pacts, and they've resolved their differences. Now, when delving into the thicket of the thorny woods, they may, upon a bridge, such as through the Fey Wild, into another era, which, having been filled with toxic fumes and poisoned clouds, have seen acidic rain fall and burn and consume their lungs, as they, having been devastated by its encounter, must find respite. And since there is none to be found outside of the designed path, would have to quickly follow this linear progress, and having burrows to hide it and buildings to seek, could block it, and choosing the right building, they may be able to rest, or perhaps the fog, moving subtly, may slip through the crack, at which point they would have to climb to the higher layers, that the floors may eventually find a safe place from the fog, and if so, they may be able to acquire a position on the roof, allowing them in the tops of the trees to escape the horrors that lie beneath, and, in this regard, acquire their respite as they desperately plan for their means of escape. Understanding the function of the location, they would meticulously designed ways to engage in a platformer type engagement, checking their athletic abilities to be able to clear areas lest they tumble, not too far, but entirely too deadly, as their ability to escape to this location being fallen from becomes entirely impossible as the poisonous vapor and cloud fills their lungs and exhales for the last time. On point, they may find the ability to escape but they would have to first wrangle some acidic chickens, and do so without its shepherds being able to notice, lest they be utterly devastated, and in this regard come together with their specific plan to catch them while they are unawares, and having done so, could wrangle them and put a bit in their mouth and a makeshift shadow, and then ride back to where they came from, allowing them subtly and quickly to escape with as much as they could carry, given their particular traumas in this survival horror landscape. If they or others are able to escape with their very own lives, they could return to their religious parties, which then would welcome them in to their respective purposes and rituals under the larger ecosystem, which, having at its core alliance with the Concord Killers, who observe true neutrality, and thus the action of not choosing between angel or demon or what have you, would by definition have the true rebalancing of scales of any particular cosmic event, which the entirety of the ecosystem is at service to, and they, having been bound by law in alignment with these agreements, have a precognious development concerning their wish for the divine intervention to have understood when these Concord Killers would have been fatally in danger otherwise, and subsidized them for their assisted terrorist operations, that they may acquire these objectives in an exchange of favors and benefits between their gods and themselves, and thus the ecosystem's gods materialize these alliances and grow in their wealth exponentially towards their aligned prosperities, and not betraying their alliances with these gods, the Concord Killers would never contract against them, as they are subordinate amplifiers, creating a cosmic, energetic, godly aura, which amplifies some of them exponentially, that they may accidentally, according to the will of the ecosystem, become ascended into solars or gods, which could represent the leaders of their own religious particulars as they accelerate towards their cosmic ends at the service and amplification of the ecosystem and all that dwells in attunement with it. This, of course, is not to ignore the lovely Hansel and Gretel candy buildings derived by the mechanism of the pastry chef, otherwise known as the pastry fiends, and this pie fiend being able to create all forms of mischievous magical infusements would often use the function to, instead of any particular position of malice according to the trickery and polymorph abilities, could infuse a throat leech or some other long-standing parasite, which, exponentially taking too long to understand the connection and the relationship between one and the other, could create a horrific nightmare for the party, who would have to go to a cleric or some medical apparatus in order to have it purged from them for a small fee, and this, feeding the economy of the system, becomes fundamental to the nature of the ecosystem, as we are our eats and poops, and the nature of a parasite going from one to the other, similar to the parasite that drives rats crazy, that by definition makes the cat piss intoxicating and sexually arousing, would make them outraged in the position that they would find a cat and smell its pee and run after it, according to this dominatrix relationship, that it may be eaten by the cat, that it could be stooled inside of the cat, so that it could go through its process, having hatched new eggs inside of the cat, and go back into the rats and continue the life cycle of these parasites, and this being fundamental to the existence of true nature and its relationships from one creature to another, continues the cycle infinitely. Understanding his place in the thing, the Pie Fiend would actively feed the green dragons, and thus in the arrangement of the infinite development of this provision materialize the exchange of souls, as it is understood that the processing and maturity rate from the parasite from egg to adult to sexually viable to reproducing for more eggs requires this consistent feeding mechanism, and the cycle continues, and life finds a way. Now, as is natural inside the human biome, you generate the bacteria which tell the body what it wants. And therefore, if you have something that is sweet and become attuned to it, then you find sweets more attractive and you find healthy foods less appealing. And if you have a healthy appetite, you will find healthy foods appetizing and sweets less appealing. And to this extent, the exponential development through the path of the active consumption of the various pastries and others could, by definition, found to yourself that you have discovered an entirely new addiction, that you have obtained an acquired taste, slowly, progressively altering the person through subtle changes inside of the food mechanisms, would generate the position that the only thing that could quite satisfy is guts and gore and blood, filth in muck in ooze, that they may consume the biles that the excess discarded, that being developed as the thing to be thrown away, such as the guts and the excess and the bones of a butcher's creature, that it, having been taken off for all of its meat, had all of its byproducts thrown away, could only be the thing that satisfies, and they, desperate for this thing, have become this hideous thing, not in physical appearance, but in fundamental nature. And as the various investigations and byproducts are developed from any specific or general concept, where they find themselves in, accidentally or on purpose, could find the exponential travels necessary in order to acquire the particular recipes or other benefits specifically necessary to any given interest to an adventure, such as the travels upon the river Styx and its travels through hell, that it, as an exchange, is beyond the pale of the head patron and its ability to enter hell, and thus the barring of the entry unless they, the party, or those that can be contracted to assist it, could acquire the various benefits of the shipping and products developed from the long distance exchanges and services of rare and unique qualities specific to locations and in specific combinations and with deadlines and expirations for when a thing being plucked can be considered good for the objective or lose its luster. This, of course, creates a permanent bond between particular areas that, similar to the Fey Gateway portals, may enter these river Styx upon these overlapping weak points between locations that they may enter at any of the given locations, and being able to survive as a matter of endurance long enough to acquire the shipment and its various interested products that they may return as safely as could be possible given the circumstances of their given request and its consequences. Revenge won't bring your father back, and it is a fool's chance to attempt to. I, by the strength of our backs and the sweat of our brow, and the courage of our hearts, brace up yards, you cracked-handed deck specs. Dying is the day worth living for.